Chapter 1. Look, all I know is this. The Seps can't have as many droids as Intel says. We've seen that when we've sabotaged their factories. And if they have gazillions of them somewhere, why not overrun the whole Republic now and get it over with? Come to that. Why won't the Chancellor listen to the generals and just smash the key Sep targets, instead of dragging this war out, spreading us thin from core to rim? Add that garbage to the message Lama Su sent him griping about the clone contract expiring in a couple of years. It all stinks. And when it stinks that bad, we get ready to run, because it's our Shebsi on the line here. Understand? Sergeant Cal Skirata, to the Null ARCs, discussing the future in light of new intelligence gathered during their unauthorized infiltration of Tapalca City, 462 days after Geonosis. Republic Fleet Auxiliary Corps Conveyor, en route for Muriel, 2nd Airborne, 212th Battalion, and Omega Squad embarked 470 days after Geonosis. Nice of you to join us, Omega, said Sergeant Barlex, one hand wrapped around the grab rail in the ship's hangar. And may I be the first to say that you look like a bunch of complete prats? Darman waited for Niner to tell Barlex where to shove his opinion, but he didn't take the bait and carried on adjusting the unfamiliar winged jetpack. It was just the usual bravado that went with being scared and hyped up for a mission. Okay, so the Skytrooper's standard pack didn't fit comfortably on Republic Commando Katarn armor, but for accuracy of insertion, it still beat paragliding. Darman had vivid and painful memories of a low-opening emergency jump on Kilura that hadn't been on target, unless you counted trees. So he was fine with a pair of white wings, even if they were the worst bolt-on goodie in the history of procurement in the Grand Army of the Republic. Fee activated his wing mechanism, and the two blades swung into horizontal position with a hiss of hydraulics, nearly smacking Barlex in the face. Fee smiled and flapped his arms. Want to see my impression of a Geonosian? What, plummeting to the ground in a spray of bug splatter after I put a round through you? Said Barlex. You're so masterful. I'm so a sergeant, Private. Couldn't you at least get us matte black ones? Fee asked. One don't want to plunge to my doom with uncoordinated accessories. People will talk. You'll have white, and like it. Barlex was the senior NCO of Parjai Squad, airborne troops with a reputation for high-risk missions that Captain Ordo called assertive outreach. The novelty of supporting special forces had clearly worn off. Barlex pushed Fee's flight blades back into the closed position and maintained a scowl. Anyway, I thought you bunch were born-again Mandalorians. Jetpacks should make you feel right at home. Off for calf and cakes afterward? Barlex was still unsmiling granite. Orders are to drop extra material and other useless ballast, meaning you, and then shorten our survival odds again by popping in for a chat with the Seps on Muriel. Fee did his wounded concern act, hands clasped under his chin. Is it the Mando thing that's coming between us, dear? Just my appreciation of the irony that we're fighting Mando mercenaries in some places. I'd better keep you away from Sergeant Cal, then. Yeah, you do that, said Barlex. I lost 10 brothers thanks to them. Clone troopers might have been able to sing Vode Ann, but it was clear that the proud Mandalorian heritage hadn't quite percolated through all the ranks. Darman decided not to tell Skirata. He'd be mortified. He wanted all Jango Fett's clones to have their souls saved for the Manda by some awareness of the only fragile roots they had. Barlex's hostility would break his heart. The compartment went quiet. Darman flexed his shoulders, wondering how Geonosians coped with wings. Did they sleep on their backs, or hang like hawkbats, or what? He'd only ever seen the bugs moving or dead, so it remained another unanswered question. He had a lot of those. Niner, ever alert to the mood of his squad, walked around each of them and checked the makeshift securing straps, yanking hard on the harness that looped between Fee's legs. Fee yelped. Niner gave Fee that 3-beat silent stare, just like Skirata. Don't want anything falling off, do we, son? No, Sarge. Not before I've had a chance to try it out anyway. Niner continued the stare for a little longer. Sit rep briefing in 10, then. He indicated the hatch and inspected the interior of his helmet. "Let's not keep General Zay waiting." Barlek stood silent as if he was working up to telling them something, then shrugged and took Niner's indication that what was to follow wasn't for his ears. Darman did what he always did before an insertion. He settled in a corner to recheck his suit calibration. Aten inspected Fee's jetpack clips with a critical frown. "I could knit better attachments than these," he muttered. "Do you think you could try cheery and upbeat sometime?" "Atika?" Fee asked. Niner joined in the inspection ritual. It was all displacement activity, but nobody could ever accuse Omega Squad of leaving things to chance. "All it has to do is stay attached to Fee until he lands," he said. Fee nodded. "That would be nice." Aten set the encrypted holoreceiver he had been holding on a bulkhead ledge and locked the compartment hatches. Darman couldn't imagine any clone trooper being a security risk, and wondered if they were offended by being shut out of Spec Ops briefings as if they were civilians, but they seemed to take it as routine, apparently uncurious and uncomplaining, because that was the way they'd been trained since birth. They had their role, and the Republic Commandos had theirs. That was what the Kaminoans had told them anyway. But it wasn't entirely true. Trooper Kor, last surviving man of his whole company, was now on SO Brigade strength and seemed to be enjoying himself charging around the galaxy with the Null ARCs. He was becoming quite a double act with Lieutenant Muriel. They shared a taste for the finer points of booby traps. They also enjoyed exploring the social scene, as Skirata put it, of every city they happened to pass through. Kor fits in just fine. I bet they all can, given the chance and the training. Darman slipped on his helmet and retreated into his own world. Comlinks closed except for the priority override that would let the squad break into the circuit and alert him. If he let his mind drift, the scrolling light display of his HUD blurred and became the nightscape of Coruscant, and he could immerse himself in the precious memory of those brief and illicit days in the city with Etain. Sometimes he felt as if she were standing behind him, a feeling so powerful that he'd look over his shoulder to check. Now he recognized the sensation for what it was. Not his imagination or longing, but a Jedi. His Jedi reaching out in the Force to him. "Yes, General Turmukan. You're well out of line, soldier." He felt her touch now, just the fleeting awareness of someone right next to him. He couldn't reach back. He just hoped that, however the Force worked, it let her know that he knew she was thinking of him. But why did the Force speak to so few beings if it was universal? Darman felt a pang of mild resentment. The Force was another aspect of life that was close to him, but at least that was true for pretty well everyone. It didn't bother him anywhere near as much as the dawning realization that he didn't have what most others did: a little choice. He'd once asked Etain what would happen to the clone troops when the war was over, when they won. He couldn't think about losing. Where would they go? How would they be rewarded? She didn't know. The fact that he didn't know either fed a growing uneasiness. Maybe the Senate hasn't thought that far ahead. Fee turned to pick up his helmet and started calibrating the display, the expression on his face distracted and not at all happy. This was Fee unguarded, not funny, not wisecracking, and alone with his thoughts. Darman's helmet let him observe his brother without provoking a response. Fee had changed, and it had happened during the operation on Coruscant. Darman felt Fee was preoccupied by something the rest of them couldn't see, like a hallucination you'd never tell anyone about because you thought you were going crazy. Or maybe you were afraid nobody else would admit to it. Darman had a feeling he knew what it was, so he never talked about Etain, and Aten never went on about Lasima. It wasn't fair to Fee. The core conveyor's drives had a very soothing frequency. Darman settled into that light doze where he was still conscious, but his thoughts rambled free of his control. Yes, Coruscant was the problem. It had given them all a glimpse into a parallel universe where people lived normal lives. Darman was smart enough to realize that his own lift wasn't normal, that he'd been bred to fight, nothing else. But his gut said something else entirely, that it wasn't right or fair. He'd have volunteered. He was sure of that. They wouldn't have had to force him. All he wanted at the end of it was some time with Etain. He didn't know what else life had to offer, but he knew there was a lot of it he would never live to see. He'd been alive for 11 standard years, coming up on 12. He was 23 or 24, the manual said. It wasn't time enough to live. Sergeant Cowell said we'd been robbed. Fearfek, I hope Etain can't feel me getting angry. I wish I could sit there and just relax like you, Dar, Otten said. How'd you get to be so calm? You didn't learn it from Cal, that's for sure. There's just Sergeant Cowell and Etain and my brothers. Oh, and Jusik. General Jusik is one of us. Nobody else really cares. I've got a clean conscience, Darman said. It had come as a surprise to him after years of cloistered training on Commando to discover that many cultures in the galaxy regarded him as a killer, something immoral. Either that, or I'm too tired to worry. Now he was going to Gaftakar to do some more killing. The Alpha ARCs might have been sent in to train the local rebels, but Omega were being inserted to topple a government. It wasn't the first, and it probably wouldn't be the last. Heads up, people. Here we go. Niner activated the receiver. The blue hollow image leapt from the projector, and burly, bearded Jedi General Arligan Zay, Director of Special Forces, was suddenly sitting in the compartment with them. Good afternoon, Omega, he said. It was the middle of the night as far as they were concerned. I've got a little good news for you. Fee was back on the secure helmet comlink now. Darman's red HUD. Audio icon indicated that only he could hear him, which means the rest of it is bad. That's good, sir, said Niner deadpan. Have we located ARC? Alpha 30? Zay seemed to ignore the question. Null Sergeant Aiden's sent secure drop zone coordinates, and you're clear to go in. Fee's comlink popped in Darman's ear again. Here comes the but. But, Zay went on, ARC Trooper Alpha 30 now has to be treated as MIA. He hasn't reported in for 2 months, and that isn't unusual. But the local resistance told Sergeant Aiden that they lost contact about the same time. Aiden was one of Skirata's Null ARCs. He'd been sent in a few standard days ago to assess the situation, and if he couldn't find the missing ARC trooper, then the man was definitely lost, as in dead lost. Darman wondered what could possibly have happened to an ARC. They weren't exactly easy kills. The Nulls treated their Alpha brothers as knuckle-draggers, but they were pure Jango Fett, genetically unaltered except for their rapid aging, and they'd been trained by him personally. Hard, resourceful, dangerous men. Still, even the best could have bad luck. It meant that training and motivating the Gaftakari resistance was down to Aiden now. Darman hoped it didn't end up being his job. All he could think about was how long he'd be stuck there and when he might see Etain again. Smuggled letters and comlink signals weren't enough. So what can they do to us? So what if anyone finds out? Darman didn't really know how hard the Grand Army or the Jedi Council could make life for him or Etain. There was always the chance that he'd never see her again. He wasn't sure he could handle that. He knew she was his only taste of a real life. So are we starting over, General? Niner asked. Zay's desk wasn't visible in the holo image, but he was sitting down, and he glanced over his shoulder as if someone had come into the room. Not entirely. The rebel militias are competent, but they still need some help in destabilizing the Gaftakari government, and they need equipment like the Deeses we're dropping. Zay paused. Not full spec, of course. I see we trust them implicitly, sir. We've had 1 or 2 aid operations backfire, Sergeant. I admit that. No point overarming them so they can turn around and use the kit on us. This does the job. Any general intel update on Gaftakar? No, sorry. You'll have to fill in the gaps yourself. Numbers? Aiden says around 100,000 trained rebel troops. Darman blinked to activate his HUD database and checked the estimated population of Gaftakar. Haifa billion, capital city Ayat, population 500,000. He was used to odds like that now. Well, at least Alpha 30 was busy while he was there, sir, said Niner. The rebels are very good at cascading training. Train 10, they train 10 each and so on. Given our limited numbers, sir, have you ever thought about deploying the whole GAR that way? The war would be over a lot faster. It's a strategy, I know. Zay always had that note in his voice lately that made him sound ashamed and embarrassed. Nobody had to ask if this was how he wanted to play things. It was another objective from the Chancellor on the list of take this planet and don't give me excuses orders. But all you need to do is remove the leadership of the Ayat administration, and the rest follows. So you prepare the battleground for the infantry. Enable the rebels. Do what you can, lads, because I can't spare any more men to help you. Great. Understood, said Niner. Sometimes Darman wanted to ram his sergeant's patient acceptance down his throat. Omega out. Nobody needed to remind Zay how thinly spread all the GAR forces were, especially special operations. They were cross-training regular troopers for commando roles now. The GAR had fewer than 5,000 Republic commandos. Inadequate didn't even come close. It was a joke. Darman waited for Niner to sign off with a surprisingly perfunctory salute and closed the link, and that wasn't good old gung-ho Niner at all. It was the closest he'd ever come to showing his frustration to the squad. Maybe the Republic would have been better off with droids after all. They don't get hacked off about what's happening to them. And they don't fall in love. I'll try to look on the bright side, seeing as that's my job, said Fee. Last time we inserted into enemy territory without any decent intel, and with totally inadequate numbers, we made lots of interesting new friends. Maybe I'll be the one to get lucky this time. Darman ignored the jibe about Etain. The Gaftikar rebels aren't your type, Fee. They're lizards. So are Faline. I mean lizards, luggage on legs. They've got a human population too. Optimist. Niner changed the subject with uncharacteristic gentleness. Come on, we always insert without enough intel. He hadn't told Fee to shut up in ages, as if he felt sorry for him now. It's the way the world works. Okay, buckets on. We'll be over Ayat in 20 minutes. The core conveyor's cargo hangar was a stark void with a ramped airlock at one end. It was an armed freighter, one of many commandeered from the merchant fleet taken up from trade, and so nicknamed Tufties. It was built simply to move vehicles and supplies, and sometimes men, and unload them discreetly where required. Darman wondered what its cargo had been in peacetime. Like the small traffic interdiction vessels, it masqueraded as a neutral civilian craft for covert operations. Tufties could be deployed on planets where the arrival of an acclimator would get the wrong sort of attention. The hangar was packed with speeder bikes and crates. Darman picked his way through them, following Otten to the hangar doors where a loadmaster in yellow-trimmed pilot armor, minus helmet, steered crates on repulsors toward the ramp and lined them up. "Deuces," said the loadmaster, not looking up from his datapad. "And a few E-webs and one large arty piece." "How many webs?" Otten asked. 50. Is that the best we can do?" "We've been arming them for a year. Just a top-up." The loadmaster seemed satisfied that he had the correct consignments and stared at the commandos with a wary eye. He reached for the rail that ran along the bulkhead and hooked his safety line to it. "If it's any comfort, you look pretty sinister in that black rig, even with the white wings. I don't think you're a bunch of overrated Mando-loving weirdos at all." Fee gave him a bow. "May all your future deployments be with the Galactic Marines on fresher detail, Niar Vod." But Otten could never pass things off with a joke. "What's your problem, pal?" "Just wondering," said the loadmaster. "Wondering what?" "Mandos? You ever fought those guys?" "I have. They keep popping up in SEP forces. They kill us, and you were raised as good little Mando boys. Is that who you feel you are?" "Let's put it this way," said Fee. "I don't feel like a Republic citizen because none of us are, in case you hadn't noticed. We don't exist. No vote, no identification docs, no rights." Niner shoved Fee in the back. 1-5, shut it. Loadmaster, wind your neck in and don't question our loyalty. or I'll have to smack you. Now let's get to work. It was the first time that Darman could recall the sense of brotherhood among clones all clones, regardless of unit faltering. The 2nd Airborne obviously had an issue with Mandalorians, and maybe the nearest they could kick were the Republic Commandos raised, trained, and educated mostly by Mandalorian sergeants like Skirata, Vau, and Brawler. He thought it was a bad omen for the mission. Yes, Sergeant Cal would be very upset to see this. Core conveyor was low enough now for them to see the landscape beneath from one of the viewports. Darman could see from his HUD icon of Niner's field of view that he wasn't looking at the drop zone, but was engrossed in his datapad. It was just a mass of numbers. Auden, though, was reading a message, and although Darman tried not to be nosy, he couldn't help but notice that it was from Lasima, his Twi'lek girlfriend, and it was educational. They do say it as the quiet ones that want watching. Darman tried to concentrate on Gaftikar. It looked like. Nice place even at night. It wasn't a red, dusty wasteland like Geonosis, or a freezing wilderness like Fest. From the height, the city of Ayat was a mosaic of illuminated parkland and busy straight roads fringed by regularly spaced houses speckled with gold light. A river wandered through the landscape, visible as a black, glittering ribbon. It looked like the kind of place where people had normal lives and enjoyed themselves. Didn't look like enemy territory at all. Darman cut into Fee's personal circuit to speak, but was instantly deafened by the volume of the Glimmick music. That was how Fee dealt with things. A thick wall of noise and chatter to shut out the next moment. Darman cut out of the circuit again. The Loadmaster lowered his visor and placed his hand over the control panel. Okay, remember, just let yourselves drop like a normal parasail jump for a few seconds, then activate the jets. Don't power out. Opening in 5, 4. I'd rather know if the jetpack didn't work when I still had my boots on the deck, Fee said. 2, and go. The cargo doors slid back and a fierce blast of air peppered dust against Darman's visor. The charts were over thick forest now. The Loadmaster had one hand on the cargo release, and his head turned toward the holochart projected on the control panel. It showed open land a few kilometers ahead. When conveyor overflew it, the open space turned out to be short, dry grass. It showed up clearly in Darman's night vision filter. Kid away, said the Loadmaster, releasing the static lines. The crates slipped off the ramp one by one and glided toward the land on extraction parasails that looked like exotic white blooms opening in the night. The last container dwindled to a speck beneath them, hitting the grass in a plume of dust. The ship climbed a little, and the ramp raised to a flat platform. This is your stop, Omega. Stay safe, okay? Darman, like all the commandos, had done plenty of free-fall jumps. He couldn't even recall how many, but he still felt a brief burst of adrenaline as he watched Auden walk calmly off the end of the ramp and vanish. Darman followed him, gripping his DC-17 flat against his chest on its sling. 1, 2, 3, 4 paces, and then 5 on 5. There was nothing beneath the soles of his boots. He fell and his stomach seemed to collide with his lungs, forcing the breath out of them for a heartbeat. He hit the jetpack power button on his harness on the count of 3. The wings ejected from their housing. The motor kicked in. He wasn't falling any longer. He was flying, with the faint vibration of the jets making his sinuses itch. The green-lit image of Gaftikar's heathland spread beneath him, and when he turned his head, he could see the faint heat profile from Auden's jets. Conveyor was gone. The crate had a lot more acceleration than he'd thought. Look, Ma, said Fee's disembodied voice on the secure channel. No hands. You haven't got a ma, said Darman. Maybe a nice old lady will adopt me. I'm very lovable. Darman couldn't see the others now, only their viewpoint icons on his helmet's HUD. The squad split up, each man full-lowing a different flight path to the RV point, dropping as low as they could and hugging the contours of the land. The plan was to hit the ground running literally as soon as the terrain changed to woods they could use for cover. Darman didn't make quite the clean landing he'd expected. He somersaulted on the tip of one wing, coming to rest in low scrubby bushes. Niner must have seen his HUD icon. Can't you ever land on your feet, Dar? Oh, sick. Darman was more embarrassed than hurt. At least he hadn't set fire to the vegetation. The jets shut off on impact. He scrambled to his feet and reoriented himself. I'm okay. He couldn't tell where Fee and Otten were from the view in their HUD icons. But he could see they were moving fast, and their transponders were converging on the RV coordinates, blue squares edging toward a yellow cross superimposed on a chart of the drop zone. He realized he still had 50 meters to run with the jetpack, wings spread like an insect. All clear. Niner grunted as if he was struggling out of his harness. Short-range comms only from now on, Omega now, where... You know, on Uron 5, the locals would stick you on top of a festival tree as a decoration. An unfamiliar voice cut into Darman's comm circuit. Now he could see a shape in his night vision, a faint outline that didn't resolve into a man until he was right on top of it. He could see who it was now, a man who looked pretty much like himself, except that, like all the Nulls, he was broader and heavier. The Kaminoans had played around with the Fett genome a little too much at first. Darman wondered how many other experiments they tried before they got the mix right. Aiden, Null ARK N12, grabbed him by the arm and beckoned him to follow. He was wearing rough working clothes, no helmet, no plates, and no distinctive kilt-like comma. Darman hadn't been expecting to find him in civvies. And as he picked his way through the undergrowth, cursing the stupid wings that now wouldn't retract because he'd bent the mechanism in the fall, he also didn't expect to see small, fast-moving figures with bright reflective eyes emerging with DC-15 rifles. They were lizards, all right.